next week, there's going to be a whole lot of people occupying a building, a Hilton Hotel here in Washington, D.C. Can a movement save the American dream? I mean, this is actually a fundamental question. We tend to think of politicians and parties as the things that save the American dream. I would suggest to you that they never have saved the American dream or created the American dream. It has always been movements. And one of the guys who has been right out of the front of this for years and years and really understands this well, Robert Borosage is with us. He's the founder and president of the Institute for America's Future, the co-director of the Campaign for America's Future, contributing editor to The Nation magazine, the website ourfuture.org. Robert Borosage, welcome back to the program, Robert.
My pleasure. How are you?
Very good, very good. And thank you for joining us. Tell us, first of all, you wrote a great piece with Katrina Vanden Heuvel in the in the Nation. Can a movement save the American dream? Can a movement save the American dream?
Well, I think what we say is that we think only a movement can save the American dream. You know, historically, when America reached these levels of extreme inequality that we have now, where 1% of the top 1% of Americans make as much money as the bottom 60% and have as much wealth as the bottom 90%, we've reached these extremes previously, and it's always been very populist citizen movements that have organized, demonstrated, created ideas, run politicians, created political parties. You know, the populists in the late turn of the 1900s, the 1800s, that challenged the robber barons and began the process of putting rules around capitalism. Then the socialists and the communists and the labor movement and Huey Long and the Townsend movement in the 30s that drove Roosevelt to do the New Deal that we remember, that had Social Security and the Wagner Act and the right to organize in it. All of those things were driven not by politicians, but by citizen movements operating and challenging the limits of a debate that was being dominated by big money.
Yeah, very, very well said. I'm curious if you're familiar and if you have a level of familiarity with the late 19th century. I don't. To know why Grover Cleveland was the only Democrat who served during that time. He had two terms that were not contiguous. And if there was a revolutionary moment, I mean, clearly the Civil War was a revolutionary moment. Reconstruction was a revolutionary moment. But then what happened between the 1870s and 1905 and Teddy Roosevelt and whatnot?
Well, you had a very long economic depression, really. And as industrialization proceeded and the horrors that were factories at that time where the right to organize was literally considered against the Constitution, and workers were, in hellholes, working 7 days a week, no limits on hours, no overtime, etc. Cleveland was really the new Democrat of his time. He was not much of a reformer. He embraced the big money politics, and it was one of the reasons why a populist movement, the People's Party, kind of arose out of the Midwest and began to unite labor with small farmers who were just getting screwed by the railroads.
Right, the Grange movement.
And began to demand, looser money, silver, not just gold standard, that would make it easier to borrow money and easier for farmers to be able to borrow while they had to plant seeds and wait for crops to grow. And then antitrust legislation that would take on the railroad monopoly and the steel monopoly and the other monopolies that were really wrenching people with prices, and then massive and vicious organizing drives around an attempt to give workers some rights at the workplace.
Yeah, the thing that I always found fascinating was in his 1887, annual State of the Nation speech. He talked about how the rise of corporate interests has led to great wealth at the top, and the average man it lays with the iron heel of corporations on his neck. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty close. And I thought that's a hell of a thing for a president to say in the late 19th century, But in any case, here we are. The economy works fabulously well for a few, you write. The richest 1% capture nearly a quarter of the nation's income and control 40% of its wealth. They've pocketed almost all of the rewards of the past decade's economic growth. I would say the past 3 decades even. Tahrir Square erupted in revolution in January. Is America on the edge of a revolution, not a shooting kind of revolution, but a political revolution like the New Deal was, like, frankly, I think the Reagan Revolution was a revolution?
Yeah, I think we're at the point where the entrenched politics and interests of the last 30 years, the conservative ideas, the corporate interests, have now led the economy off the cliff and have created an economy that doesn't work for most Americans. And it's at that point where you get these eruptions. The Tea Party is a form of that eruption, distorted, I think, by the money that backs it and kind of cynical politics underneath it. But it expresses this sense that Washington's working for a very few wired interests, and it's not working for everyday Americans. And I think you see that in the Occupy Wall Street movement, which starts out with a group that no one knows before, right? And yet captures the spirit of the time, the sense that these big banks have been bailed out at the cost of trillions of dollars and are back to making 30% of all corporate profits. And meanwhile, they're the ones who caused the mess and the crisis, and we're the ones asked to pay for it. I think you're going to get real upheaval and a real change in our politics.
Yeah, this young man in Tunisia, a college-educated young man who couldn't get a job, he was selling fruit on the street, and he got ripped off, and he flipped out. He poured gasoline on himself and caught himself on fire, self-immolated, and that moment started the Arab Spring. And
a literal spark.
Yeah, and it seems to me that when we look back a year or two from now, we're going to see the moment when this police officer put pepper spray in the eyes of these young women in New York City last week who were trying to occupy Wall Street, who were doing nothing other than just standing there. That may well be the spark, because now we have 10 or 12 cities where there are Occupy Detroit, Occupy Seattle, Occupy Chicago, movements that are erupting right now out of this. Do you think it's possible?
I think it's possible. And remember, it's preceded even this. So we had the assault in Wisconsin on worker rights and an extraordinary outpouring, tens of thousands of people occupying the Capitol, students and non-union workers and middle-class people coming to the defense of workers, and a sense in Wisconsin that, wait a minute, this thing is way too extreme, and now they're really crushing the American dream.
But I think this is even broader. Robert, we just have a little bit of time. I want to mention that next week you're running a conference. The Take Back the tell us about the conference. Take Back the
American Dream next week, Monday through Wednesday in Washington at the Hilton. You can get information about the agenda and register at ourfuture.org. This is a really important gathering. This is activists from around the country coming together to try to plan out the next 18 months and how we build a popular movement that is militant, that is intent not just on demonstrating, but on taking power, on running candidates, on challenging Democrats that have gone to the other side, on taking on the right wing that seems intent on destroying the economy, and building a movement that can make America work for working people again.
And we will be doing this show live from the Free Speech TV E-Studio in the Hilton at the Take Back the American Dream conference. That you can read about at ourfuture.org. We'll be there all next week. Thank you, Robert.
My pleasure.